Hello and welcome to another Ask GCN Anything. This week we will be discussing food intake on rides, how much you can realistically expect to improve your FTP in a year, and also why gears are restricted in junior bike races.
Yes, but before we get on to those very important questions, a quick look back to the question that we had in last week, which was asking how male riders should store their package inside their bib shorts. We had some very interesting responses after I asked for your advice out there. I have a question. How does one position their private parts inside the bib shorts? Right. Well, if you look at any video where Richardson is riding a bike and presenting off it, you'll get the answer to your question from his personal perspective. Shadow Wolf, very helpful. He says, easy really, make sure you're not sitting on the crown jewel. So if you've been doing that, possibly something to change, but just bear in mind that you'll need to change your saddle height if you've been doing that as well. Jacques Chiron was particularly upset that I pointed out to look at advice from your videos, as you can see here.
I'm not sure I've ever covered that in a video I've presented it.
No, you haven't covered it as such. Whilst Coco had noticed the bulge, but thought it was a spare inner tube.
What bulge?
Yeah, anyway, there you go.
Okay. All right, then, well, let's move swiftly on then from that delicate subject to this first question for this week, which is from Ben Cohen. Any tips for getting down more food on rides? I can never seem to stomach enough food during tempo, threshold training or group rides and always blow up about 3 hours in. Help. Well, that is a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like all these things, actually practice really helps. Yes, you can indeed practice eating on a bike. You can get your stomach accustomed to eating more food, but actually probably what you're eating is really, really important. So I always found that drinking carbohydrates and also gels were the two main ways that I could get carbs down when riding, racing, basically.
Yeah, that way it doesn't feel like you're actually eating anything at all because it's in pretty much liquid form. Making your own energy bars though is a great starting point because that way you can refine the recipe until you come up with something that you really like the taste of, because you're far more likely to be able to eat if you actually like the taste of what's in your back pockets. And Cy, many years ago, did a recipe called the Uber bar, which is still a firm favourite amongst many of our viewers. So that is a great starting point for anyone, and you can find that recipe in this video.
Now this next bit is really important, okay? Because you need to press it down really thoroughly. Otherwise, your energy bars are gonna disintegrate. So you need to pack it down with a metal fork, I find is the best implement. Right, let's throw this in the oven now. Gas mark 4, which is about 180 degrees centigrade, which is about 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So we'll just throw that in the oven.
Those bars do look delicious, must admit.
Really
Next up, a question underneath last week's show from Gumster. How do the pros and others who put in long and hard hours every week manage not to get eaten up by cortisol? I'm struggling a bit myself. Well, for those of you wondering exactly what cortisol is, a very basic explanation is that it is a hormone that your body produces in response to stress. So if the levels are quite high, it's a decent indication that you are fatigued. What we must always remember though with professional riders is that whilst they do have a demanding job in terms of the fact that it is quite hard racing and training on a bike for hours every day, that is the only physically demanding thing that they pretty much have to do every day in general. Lots of other things are taken care of for them so they can put their feet up and have lots of time to rest and recover.
That's right, rest and recovery is ultimately the key, isn't it? Which is easier said than done if you've got a full-time job, and often, in that case, less is more when it comes to training, isn't it? And one man who has an awful lot of experience about that, doing pro-level races whilst doing a full-time job, is actually our very own Matt Stevens. And in this video here, he gave us some of his secrets, potentially even all of them, we don't know. Check it out. One thing I am thinking, if you're only doing 7 to 10 hours a week, where's your endurance coming from?
It's a really good point, and I didn't actually work on my endurance specifically until the back end of my career. But what I did do, rather than have a rest day on the Monday, we'd go easy. I'd race on the Sunday, and then Monday would be another hard day. So I'd do like maybe an hour and a half after work, quite intense, and then still keep Tuesday and Wednesday hard. So that effectively built a really hard block. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is essentially a block of 3 or 4 really hard days.
Rapid fire round now, and the first question here is from Riley Heslop, who's wondering why junior riders have to ride a certain gear ratio. Is there any actual proof that it will benefit the riders, and what does it try to achieve? Well, I looked this up, and according to USA Cycling, it is to encourage higher cadences, which in turn will hopefully reduce the number of injuries from pushing big gears by junior riders who are still developing physically. They also think it can help to level the playing field amongst riders of the same age who've developed differently in terms of their physiology. And they've also said that it helps to keep the bunches together, which can in turn help to develop a rider's racecraft, which is something I hadn't thought of or read about before.
Yeah, as frustrating as junior geese were when being a junior, I don't think it's an issue exactly, but it does sound odd given that there's no restrictions on cyclocross or mountain biking.
No.
At the same age.
And as you pointed out to me just now, you can still use 52/16 up the 20% gradient if you so wish, which would probably cause some knee problems.
Yeah, anyway, at least it is the same for everyone out there in the junior field.
Yeah. Don't forget it's the rapid fire round.
Absolutely. Bang, next one, Big by Wolf. Does average speed matter, and what is a good average speed? Well, average speed definitely doesn't matter at all because all it's doing is telling you how fast you're riding over a certain period of time. So if speed is not your be-all and end-all for cycling, then completely ignore it. In terms of what a good average speed is, it very much depends on where you're going. So a pro race in the mountains might only average 32k an hour, whereas on a flat stage it can average 50k an hour. So that gives you an illustration of what, the variation even amongst the same group of super talented riders. So sorry, it's a very difficult question to answer that. Don't worry about it, and depends where you are.
Yeah, it's about enjoying riding your bike, isn't it? So the only reason to be concerned about average speed is if your enjoyment comes from performance, really.
Yeah.
Big by, oh no, that's the one you just read out. Alan Coombs, sorry. If you could pick a current professional rider to join the GCN presenter team, who would it be and why? We discussed this before we started filming, and Si and I both said Alexis Ryan, who has appeared on a couple of GCN videos in the past, because firstly, obviously she is a current professional rider who's running at a very high standard, so she's got loads of knowledge, but also she came across very well on camera, so well in fact that I'd be slightly scared that given a month's experience she would be far better than we are at presenting.
So what options do we have to go back down?
Locals would usually head straight
Okay.
on East Camino Cielo for several miles, climbs a little bit more, and you could either descend Painted Cave, which is a narrow, twisty descent, or Old San Marcos Road.
I mean,
I think
it
after
wouldn't possibly
a day
too.
down.
I think you're right, but
Anyway,
she'd be good.
She was great fun to hang out with in the States when we were over there. A couple of years ago now, isn't it?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Wow, crikey. Yeah, anyway, right, there we go. Moving on, we've got this one from at 19 Rich 79. New £1,000 bike or train harder on my current bike for my first sportif? Well, I definitely say do both if you can, but if you can't, then certainly training harder on your current bike will inevitably make you go faster, because no matter how aero, no matter how light your new bike is, it's never going to make up for the fact that you could potentially make a 10% improvement in your fitness.
Yeah, my bet is that if Peter Scan used your specialised Alpe for that sportif, he would still mop the floor with everyone and finish probably about an hour ahead. There is no doubt that the better bikes, the aero ones and the lighter ones, are faster than cheaper bikes, but it is normally the physical form which makes much more of a difference to how fast you can go.
It is indeed. Right, next up on this quick of all quick fire question rounds, Carlos Vieira, how much can an average rider increase their FTP in 1 year with a structured training plan? And what about someone new to cycling?
Well, yeah, very much depends. Sorry, I'm going to steal this. Very much depends on your background, doesn't it? Although even people with a lot of exercise in their background, maybe endurance runners that come over, or someone that hasn't done hardly any exercise but turns out to be one of the biggest talents ever, they could both expect to make quite big improvements on the bike in that first year after taking cycling up. I'd say 50% even more. If you've got an FTP of 150 watts, you could certainly see over 12 months that go as 225 watts or over if you turn out to be that talented.
That's right. On the flip side, however, if you've been cycling your whole life and you train to a great standard, but you're, I don't know, reaching your late 50s or something, you're probably unlikely to see your FTP going up. Or indeed, you had the luxury of being a full-time bike rider, as we did, then there's absolutely no chance that your FTP is going anywhere. But
unfortunately not.
Yeah. On that sober note, I think that brings us to the end of the slowest ever quickfire question round.
Yeah, sorry. Our next question came in on Twitter from John Greentree. I ride on both cycle paths and roads on 700 by 23C tyres, but someone recommended 700 by 28 would be better for potholes. Well, they are definitely right. There's a much greater air volume in a 28C tyre, so it means that the sharp edge of a pothole has much further to get through in terms of that tyre and air volume before it meets your rim, so you've got less chance of pinch punctures.
Yeah, it's about more than that though as well, though, isn't it? It's about comfort. I can't believe, honestly, that we used to ride around on 21s and 23s all the time, given how much more comfortable it is on a 28, because you can run lower pressures, which means that you still are unlikely to pinch flat, as Dan said, but the tyre is then able to absorb all the kind of buzz and vibrations that you get from the road. But then there's more benefits than that even. It really is quite a cool subject. If you click on that video that's going on in the background, which is the truth about wide rims and wide tyres, then you'll get an awful lot more info on that very subject.
Now, one of the most intriguing but also significant benefits is actually that wider tyres generate less rolling resistance. Now, it's hard to know why we've only really just cottoned on to this fact, given that rolling resistance data has actually been out there for quite some time. But nevertheless, it is there, and a 28C tyre is shown to roll 2 to 3 watts faster on average than its equivalent 25C tyre, and that is per wheel and at 40k an hour, and the difference is even greater on 23s.
Before we get on with the last question for this week's show, a reminder that you can leave your questions below this video in the comment section, or if you prefer social media, you can just use the hashtag TalkBack on Twitter or Facebook. The last question then comes in from Gordon McDonald. I had the bike shop reverse my brake cables as my new bike came with the rear brake on the right lever, and I'm used to it being on the left. I'm originally from the UK, but I now live in California. Are these brake lever preferences regional, or did someone mess with my childhood bikes? Well, no, they didn't. There are regional variations, and in general what you'll find is that in places like Europe or the US, where you drive on the right-hand side of the road, the front brake is located on the left lever, whereas for places like the UK, where we drive on the correct side of the road, it's the other way around.
Oh, Lloydie. Just throwing a grenade in the comment section, haven't you there? Yeah, we did a bit of digging around to try and work out why this might be the case. And actually, we couldn't find anything, could we? I remember reading once that it was due to the fact that you would be able to control your bike better when you were signalling to turn across oncoming traffic. So for example, in the UK, you'd have your right arm extended, but then that's the problem, because I'd be braking with my left hand, which would be my back brake, which would be my second choice of brake, if I'm honest. To get maximum control, I'd always go for my front brake. So clearly that's not right.
Yeah, well,
there's a whole motorbike issue, but that doesn't make sense from a regional perspective.
No, maybe this is another question which we can get help on from our very knowledgeable viewers. If you know the history behind where your brakes are located right and left, then please let us know in the comment section down below, and it might be something we return to this time next week. One thing that I do know for sure is that whatever you grew up with is the safest way. So if later in life you come to get on a bike which has got the brakes the other way around, it can be particularly dangerous. As our very own Matt Stevens found out. This is what apparently caused this crash.
Apparently.
However many times I watched that, Si, I still wince. That had to hurt physically and also hurt his pride, I would imagine. I'm sure he's glad that we keep showing it. Anyway, if you do find yourself with a bike where the brakes need swapping over for you to be safe and not crash like Matt Stevens, Si goes through how to do that in this next video.
In most countries, it's the left lever that operates your front brake, but in the UK and Australia, it's often your right. Now, also called moto style, because apparently that's where motorbikes have their front brake. But I wouldn't know. Anyway, it doesn't really matter which side it's on until, of course, you get on a bike where it's set up the wrong way around, at which point it's actually just extremely dangerous.
Right, well that brings us to the end of another edition of Ask GC Anything. You might have noticed that huge race is coming up in July, and to celebrate that we have produced some special edition yellow themed t-shirts and sported by myself and Si. So if you head to the link on the screen right now, you will head over to shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com if they take your fancy. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, you can do so now as well by clicking on the globe.
Yeah, and if you're after more content, and I'm sure you probably are, then why not click just down there for a video about how to improve your functional threshold power. Could you get 50% this year? Let us know if you do manage it. Or for a more recent one, how about 6 mind-blowingly irritating maintenance jobs that are completely avoidable if you don't make these 6 mistakes?